And as she looked back on her life many, many years later, and on the many, many regrets she had, you know what? I don't want to think about my regrets. This isn't how you do an epilogue anyway. Here's how you do an epilogue with some basic do's and don'ts. Let's talk about that.
The end.
Let's start with establishing what an epilogue is in the first place. An epilogue is the twin of a prologue. Not quite an evil twin, because they're both evil, but the same yet opposite. An epilogue is an installment you put at the end of a book to highlight the story, the themes, the character growth, and can give a final treat of just a little more information about the characters or world you just made. And now on to the do's and don'ts. I said in the prologue video that this is not part of the story, and you get a lot of freedom with prologues that you don't get with the rest of the story. The prologue can follow different people in different times and different places than the rest of the story, and the same is true with the epilogue. You don't necessarily have to write it in a different time or place or with a different narrator, but you should utilize at least one of those. The epilogue should not be your main character's 5 minutes after the story has ended. If something worth noting happened 5 minutes later, the story obviously ended a little later than you thought and you need another chapter. So take advantage of all the freedom that epilogues give you. Maybe an epilogue is someone learning the history of your world that your characters affected. Maybe it's your characters recounting the story to their grandchildren. Maybe it's following up with the villain and reiterating why they should have gotten a redemption arc or are beyond saving. You get a lot of freedom with your prologues and epilogues to break out of the confines you set in your story, and you should take advantage of those. An epilogue can be put at the end of really any installment in a story, so it's fine to finish your story with loose ends, but the epilogue is not the place to wrap up any of those, even if there will be another book in the series. As I said in the prologue video, not everyone reads epilogues and prologues, so they're not the place to add plot or character growth or world building that's vital to your story. You can use it to foreshadow events for your next book, and certainly use it to set up events for your next book, but the people who skip epilogues should not start reading your next book confused because the epilogue revealed a twist that changed everything about the world. That's how you lose readers. Again, an epilogue is to highlight what's already been established. So what you should do is... You just spent hundreds of pages creating these characters, or stealing them, making people as hard, and now you want to wrap up the growth they've gone through to help reiterate who the character is now. Maybe the epilogue takes place years later and shows your character as the noble leader or fighter or sage they were always meant to be. Maybe it shows how the events of the story knocked them off that path, and here they are, destitute because they couldn't move on after everything you put them through. Either way, the epilogue is a great place to show where your character is later. And the same goes for the world and plot. You can highlight how the events of the story changed the world, or maybe how it didn't change anything at all. Either way, the epilogue is where you can highlight and recap every important thing that happened in the story. But you want to be careful because you don't want to... This is where evil in the same yet opposite ways comes in with epilogues and prologues. A prologue is a great place to put world building and help establish your world. An epilogue is a terrible place to put world building. You might be able to get away with it if the epilogue is at the end of a book that's not the last in the series, but you still want to be careful because, again, not everyone reads it. And if your epilogue is at the very end of your story, you really don't want to put more world building in there. I get where the frustration comes in, because you come up with so much world building when you make your world, and so little of it makes it into your book. But if you're in a different time and a different place with different people, you have the perfect opportunity to organically put that world building in. But don't do it. Your world has already been made. The plot is over. Now is not the time to add more to the world. What you can do, though, is... Epilogues aren't just for reiterating important events or plot points or character growth in your story. They're for helping reiterate the themes of your story. You wrote the book with a specific message in mind, and maybe that message got a little lost in the shuffle that is resolving the climax and writing your resolution. There can be a lot to put in to wrap up all your loose ends and wrap up the plot. So an epilogue can be your new best friend for your themes. If you want your characters to put your book down and really think about the message and themes of your book, you can do that with the epilogue without worrying about the villain or ongoing plot getting in the way. And last but certainly not least, it can be hard letting your book go. This is your baby. You put so much time and effort into it. You love your characters and the world, so it can be so tempting to keep writing even after the plot has finished. But that's not a good enough reason to add an epilogue. Not every book needs an epilogue, and it's easy for an epilogue to undermine your story and make it so readers don't want to come back to your work later if they feel unsatisfied or like the rug was pulled out from under them because of the epilogue. Again, not everyone will read your epilogue. It's not part of your story. You don't need to write it. An epilogue should make your writing stronger, leave the reader walking away feeling satisfied. It's a treat, not an obligation. So remember that, and don't just put an epilogue into your book for the fun of it. Make sure there is something worthwhile to recount or reiterate before you add that epilogue. Hey, quick epilogue to my epilogue video, since I kept forgetting to put my outros into my scripts and then they don't get filmed. Anyway, that's how you do an epilogue. Not this part is bad, but the rest of my video is good, so don't forget to like and comment on the video, and don't forget to read and write!